I found this very interesting. I, of course, come from a very different perspective. I'm a psychologist and neuroscientist, and I've pursued for many years the notion that human beings have a unique form of mind because we have a collective side to our mentation. No other animal has this. And I just like to remind you all that networks such as we've discussed, technological networks, economic networks, are built upon a biological platform. That is to say, they are a very late product in our evolution, and they are entirely, and I mean entirely, a function of the social networks that surround them. They serve the purposes of the individual mind, and they are constrained by the properties of the individual mind. That being said, I think that we need to extend the definition of network to include what you might think of as natural networks, that is, non-technological networks, or networks that are mediated by much simpler technology than the ones we've been talking about, because that is a critical factor in the sustainability in the long run of the type of society we built. In fact, I would argue that one of the great concerns I have about modern society and the rate at which we're evolving into this globalized electronic system is the sustainability of it, whether it's going to blow up on us, because after all, we are biological organisms. We invented these things for our own purposes, but there is perhaps some danger of them running away with things. Just to backtrack for a minute, we usually think of the mind as an individual thing. That is, most of cognitive science focuses on the properties of brains and the properties of individuals as they develop and so on. But we also have a corporate side or a distributed side, and most corporations and most governments and most large-scale networks actually have as their primary purpose the performance of cognitive work for us as a society. So the technology that we've developed is purpose-built, if you will, and ultimately serves no function other than the function that the soggy, wet biological organisms that invented this whole thing dictate. Now, I've been studying this in the context of evolution for a number of years. I wrote a book some years ago on the origins of the modern mind, in which I started off as a neuroscientist, looking at the way the brain breaks down in injury and realizing that I couldn't explain many of the properties of modern human beings in terms simply of innate brain features, that in fact culture was overriding the brain, was in fact installing architectures and altering the properties of the brain. This has been confirmed in epigenetics and in any number of other ways in the last 20 years as a very strong effect. For example, when you teach a child to read, you rewire the brain in a very dramatic way. When you introduce literacy into society, at the same time that you introduce this whole new network of symbols and so on, you are also creating functional networks in the brains of millions of people. Now this is a very major development because it has the potential, I think, to alter at least our traditional notions of human nature. One of the things I've heard repeatedly from scientifically trained people and economically trained people is the complaint that the irrationality of society. But if you look at society over the long run, and I've looked at it over a period of 3.5 million years of evolution, it's not at all astonishing. What is astonishing is that any amount of rational decision-making is ever done, because that's not a natural thing. It's a culturally invented and, if you want, retrojected property of the mind. Individuals that are embedded in networks acquire properties of the network, and in fact appear perhaps even more intelligent than they are, or more powerful than they are, as a simple computer could be if it's embedded in a very large network of powerful computers. So it's a very interesting thing that when we tinker with networks, we're tinkering with, in a sense, potentially at least, human nature itself. And this is a very important consideration. I realize that in the hurly-burly of political and economic activity and technological competition, this can be easily lost sight of, but I think in the long run it's a very important dimension of any debate on networks. I've no time here to go in any detail, but I have proposed that one of the structural problems of our modern society, the conflict between what I call theoretic culture and the more traditional types of societies on Earth and within our own society, is actually a problem based on structural features and properties of the cognitive system itself. Because depending on the type of network you're embedded in, your mind is actually quite different in terms of the concerns, the tricks that it learns, the strategies that it uses, and so on. And even the allocation of memory changes. These are all technical issues that would require a lot more time than 10 minutes. But I did want to raise this because I think that in many, many discussions that I've taken part in over the years on structural economic governance issues and so on, this dimension is often overlooked. And I think it is not only critical, but it's in the long run fundamental for sustainability. If the world is not to sort of collapse on its own, we have to take into account our biological origins. I've noticed in my brief lifetime, I've gone through, I think, 6 or 7 entire generations of IT developments, and I've seen the World Wide Web and the globalization of industry and so on occur at lightning speed. When you consider that it's taken us 3.5 million years to get to where we are, that's an instant. And there is a real question in my mind about the sustainability of all those developments. Not that I in any way think that we have any choice but to continue to work out the direction we're taking. But I think we have to reflect on the viability of all this in terms of our origin. That's really all I wanted to say.